Ezekiel chapter 39. You son of man, prophesy against Gog, and say, Thus says Adonai Elohim, Behold, I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, drive you along, and lead you up from the extreme north. I will bring you upon the mountains of Israel. Then I will strike your bow from your left hand and make your arrows drop from your right hand. You will fall on the mountains of Israel, you, all your troops, and the people that are with you. I will give you as food to all kinds of birds of prey and to the beasts of the field. You will fall on an open field, for I have spoken. It is a declaration of Adonai. I will send fire on Magog and on those who live securely in the islands. Then they will know that I am Adonai. So I will make my holy name known among my people Israel. I will not let my holy name be profaned anymore. The nations will know that I am Adonai, the Holy One in Israel. Behold, it is coming, it will be done. It is the declaration of Adonai. This is the day that I have spoken about. The inhabitants of Israel's cities will go out and kindle fires with the weapons, shield and breastplates, bows and arrows, war clubs and spears. They will make fires with them for 7 years. They will not take wood out of the field or cut anything from the forest, for they will make fire from the weapons. They will plunder those who plundered them and loot those who looted them. It is a declaration of Adonai. On that day I will give Gog a burial place there in Israel, the valley of the travelers east of the sea. It will block those who travel through, since they will bury Gog and all his multitude there. Then they will call it the valley of Hamon Gog. The house of Israel will bury them for 7 months in order to cleanse the land. All the people of the land will bury them. It will be memorable for them, a day when I am glorified. It is a declaration of Adonai. Men will be continually set apart to travel through the land and bury the travelers remaining on the face of the land in order to cleanse it. At the end of 7 months, they will make their search. When they travel through the land, if any sees a man's bones, he will set up a sign by it until the buriers have buried it in the valley of Hamon Gog. Hamona will also be the name of the city, so they will cleanse the land. You son of man, thus says Adonai Elohim, say to every kind of bird and to every beast of the field, assemble and come, gather from all around to my sacrificial feast that I have prepared for you, a great sacrifice on the mountains of Israel. You will eat flesh and drink blood. You will eat the flesh of mighty men and drink the blood of the princes of the earth, as rams, lambs, and goats and bulls, all of them fatling of Bashan. So you will eat fat until you are gorged, and you will drink blood until you are drunk, from my sacrificial feast that I have prepared for you. You will be filled at my table with horses and horsemen, with mighty men and all the warriors. It is a declaration of Adonai. I will put my glory among the nations. All the nations will see my judgment that I will execute, and my hand that I will lay on them. The house of Israel will know that I am Adonai their God from that day onward. The nations will know that the house of Israel went into exile for their iniquity, because they broke faith with me. So I hid my face from them and gave them into the hand of their enemies. All of them fell by the sword. I dealt with them according to their uncleanliness and their transgressions. I hid my face from them. Therefore, thus says Adonai Elohim, now I will restore Jacob from exile when I have compassion on the whole house of Israel. I will be zealous for my holy name. They will bear their shame and all their disloyalty by which they broke faith with me, when they were living securely in their land with no one making them afraid, when I have brought them back from the peoples and have gathered them out of their enemies' lands. I will be sanctified in them in the eyes of many nations. Then they will know that I am Adonai, their God, since it was I who caused them to go into exile among the nations, and I who will gather them back to their own land. I will never again leave them there. I will never again hide my face from them, for I have poured out my Ruach upon the house of Israel. It is a declaration of Adonai. Chapter 40. In the 25th year of our exile, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was struck down, on that very day the hand of Adonai was on me, and he brought me there. In visions of God brought me to the land of Israel, and sent me down upon a very high mountain. On it, toward the south, was something like the construction of a city. He brought me there, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like bronze. He had a linen cord in his hand and a measuring rod. He was standing in the gateway. The man said to me, Son of man, see with your eyes, hear with your ears, set your heart on all that I show you, for I brought you here in order to show you and report all that you see to the house of Israel. Behold, an outer wall was all around the house. The measuring rod in the man's hand was 6 cubits long, each of which was a normal cubit and a handbreadth. When he measured the thickness of the wall structure, it was 1 rod, and the height was 1 rod. Then he went to the gate that faced east and went up its steps. When he measured the threshold of the gate, it was 1 rod wide. Also the other threshold was 1 rod wide. Each guard chamber was 1 rod long and 1 rod wide. The space between the chambers was 5 cubits. The threshold of the gate by the porch of the gate facing the house measured 1 rod. When he measured the porch of the gate toward the house, it was 1 rod. When he measured the porch of the gate, it was 8 cubits. Its pillars were 2 cubits. The porch of the gate faced the house. Now the guard chambers of the east gate were 3 on this side and 3 on the other side. The 3 had the same measurement. The side pillars had the same measure on the side and on that side. When he measured the width of the entrance of the gate, it was 10 cubits, and the length of the gate was 13 cubits. A barrier wall was in front of the guard chambers, 1 cubit on each side. Each chamber was 6 cubits on each side. When he measured the gate from the roof of one chamber of the roof of the other, the width was 25 cubits, door facing door. Then he did the pillars, 60 cubits. A gateway extended all around to the pillar of the courtyard. Now from the front of the gate of the entrance to the front of the inner porch of the gate measured 50 cubits. There were shuttered windows toward the chambers and toward their pillars within the surrounding gate, and likewise the porches had windows and all around inside. On each pillar were palm trees. Then he brought me to the outer court. Behold, there were rooms and pavement made for the surrounding court, with 30 rooms along the pavement. The pavement was by the side of the gates, as wide as the gates were long. This was the lower pavement. He measured the width from the front of the lower gate to the exterior front of the inner court. It was 100 cubits to the east and to the north. Next, he measured the length and width of the gate of the outer court facing toward the north. Its guard chambers were 3 on this side and 3 on that side. Its pillars and its porches had the same measurements as the first gate, 50 cubits long and 20 cubits wide. Its windows, porches, and palm trees were the same measurement as the gate facing toward the east. Its stairway had 7 steps, and its porch was in front of them. A gate to the inner court was opposite to the other gate. Northward and eastward he measured 100 cubits from gate to gate. Then he led me toward the south, and behold, there was a gate toward the south. He measured its pillars and its porches. They had the same measurements. The gate and its porch had windows all around, like the other windows, 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its stairway had 7 steps, and its porches were in front of them. It had palm trees on its pillars, one on this side and another on that side. There was a gate to the inner court toward the south. He measured from gate to gate toward the south, 100 cubits. Then he brought me to the inner courts through the south gate. When he measured the south gate, it had the same measurements. Its chambers, pillars, and porch had the same measurements. There were windows in it, and in the surrounding porch it was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. There were porches all around, 25 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. Its porch was toward the outer court. Palm trees were on its pillars. Its stairway had 8 steps. Then he brought me into the inner court toward the east. He measured it with the same measurements. Its chambers, pillars, and porch had the same measurements. There were windows in it and in its surrounding porch. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its porch was toward the outer court. Palm trees were on its pillars, and on this side and on that side. Its stairway had 8 steps. He brought me to the north gate. He measured it with the same measurements, its chambers, pillars, and porch. There were windows in it all around. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its pillars were toward the outer court. Palm trees were on its pillars, and on this side and on that side. Its stairway had 8 steps. A chamber with its entry was by the pillars at the gates. There they rinsed the burnt offerings. In the porch of the gate were 2 tables on this side and 2 tables on that side, on which to slaughter the burnt offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. Off to the side, on the outside, as one goes up to the entry of the north gate, were 2 tables. On the other side of the porch of the gate were 2 tables. 4 tables were on one side, and 4 tables were on the other side, by the side of the gate. 8 tables on which they would slaughter. There were 4 tables of hewn stone for the burnt offering, 1.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1 cubit high. The instruments of the slaughter of the burnt offering and the sacrifice were laid on them. Hooks, a handbreadth long, were fastened in the house all around. The flesh of the offering was to be placed upon the tables. Outside the inner gate in the inner court were chambers for the singers, one of which was at the side of the north gate facing south, the one at the side of the east gate faced north. He said to me, "This chamber that faces toward the south is for the Kohanim who keep charge of the house. The chamber that faces toward the north is for the Kohanim who keep charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, those from the sons of Levi who come near to Adonai to minister to him." Then he measured the court. It was 100 cubits long and 100 cubits wide, a square. The altar was in front of the house. He brought me to the porch of the house. He measured each pillar of the porch, 5 cubits on this side and 5 cubits on that side. The width of the gate was 3 cubits on this side and 3 cubits on that side. The length of the porch was 20 cubits and width 11 cubits. It was ascended by way of steps, where pillars stood, one on each side. Chapter 41. Then he brought me to the temple and measured the pillars, 6 cubits wide on one side, 6 cubits wide on the other side, which was the width of the tent. The width of the entrance was 10 cubits. The side of the entrance were 5 cubits on the one side and 5 cubits on the other side. He measured its length 40 cubits and its width 20 cubits. He went to the inner room and measured each pillar of the entrance, 2 cubits, the doorway 6 cubits, and the width of the doorway 7 cubits. Then he measured the inner room's length. It was 20 cubits, and the width was 20 cubits, and in front of the temple. He said to me, "This is the Holy of Holies." When he measured the wall of the house, it was 6 cubits, and the width of every side chamber was 4 cubits, surrounding the house on every side. There were 33 side chambers. There were supports in the wall which belonged to the house for the side chambers all around, so that they were not supported by the wall of the house. The side chambers were wider as they would about higher and higher, because the winding about the house went higher and higher round about the house. Therefore, the width of the house expanded. One went up from the lowest row to the highest by way of the middle. I saw also that the house had a raised platform all around. The foundations of the side chambers were full rod of 6 cubits up to the joint. The thickness of the outer wall of the side chambers were 5 cubits. The space between the side chambers of the house and the outer chambers was 20 cubits wide all around the house on every side. The doors of the side chambers were toward the space, one door toward the north and another door toward the south. The width of the space was 5 cubits all around. The building that was before the separate area at the side toward the west was 70 cubits wide. The wall of the building was 5 cubits thick all around, and its length was 90 cubits. When he measured the house, it was 100 cubits long. The separate area in the building with its walls was 100 cubits long, and the width of the face of the house in the separate area toward the east was also 100 cubits. When he measured the length of the building facing the separate area behind it, with its galleries on each side, it was 100 cubits. Now the inner sanctuary and the porches of the court, the thresholds and the shuttered windows and the galleries all around in 3 stories opposite the thresholds were paneled with wood all around, from the ground up to the windows. Even the windows were covered over the space above the door as far as the inner house, and on all the wall outside, around, inside, and outside by measurement. It was made with cherubim and palm trees. A palm tree was between cherub and cherub. Every cherub had 2 faces, the faces of a man toward the palm tree on one side, and the face of a young lion toward the palm tree on the other side. Thus was it made on all the house all around. The cherubim and palm trees were made from the ground up to above the door and on the wall of the temple. The temple's doorposts were square. Now the front of the sanctuary had something resembling an altar, 3 cubits high and 2 cubits long, made of wood. Its corners, its base, and its sides were also of wood. He said to me, "This is the table of the presence of Adonai." The temple and inner sanctuary each had double doors. The doors each had 2 turning leaves, 2 leaves for one door and 2 leaves for the other. Cherubim and palm trees were made on them, on the doors of the temple, just like those made on the walls. There were thick beams of wood in the face of the porch outside. There were shuttered windows and palm trees on one side and on the other on the side of the porch, the side chambers of the house, and the thick beams. Chapter 42. He led me out to the outer courtyard toward the north. He brought me to the chamber that was opposite the separate area and opposite of the building toward the north. The length of the building with the door on the north was 100 cubits, and the width was 50 cubits. Opposite the 20 cubit space belonging to the inner court and opposite the pavement belonging to the outer court was gallery by gallery in 3 stories. In front of the chambers was a walkway 10 cubits wide and 100 cubits long. Their doorways were toward the north. The upper chambers were narrower because the gallery took more away from them than from the lower and the middle ones into the building, for they were in 3 stories and had no pillars like the pillars of the courtyards. Therefore, more space was taken away than from the lower and the middle floors in comparison with the ground. A wall that was outside by the side of the chambers toward the outer court in front of the chambers was 50 cubits in length, for the chambers that were toward the outer courts were 50 cubits long, while those facing the temple were 100 cubits. Below these chambers was the entrance on the east side, as one enters them from the outer courtyard. In the thickness of the wall of the courtyard toward the east, in front of the separate area in front of the building, there were chambers. The passageway in front of them were similar to the chamber on the north, as long as and wide as them, with all their exits and similar arrangement and doors, corresponding to the doorways of the chambers on the south.
There was a doorway at the head of the passageway, a way directly in front of the wall toward the east, as no one enters them. Then he said to me, the north chambers and the south chambers, which are before the separate area, they are the holy chambers, where the Kohanim who are near to Adonai eat the most holy things. There they put the most holy things, the grain offerings, the sin offerings, and the guilt offering, for the place is holy. Once the Kohanim enter, they are not to go out of the holy place into the outer court without leaving there their garments in which they minister, for they are holy. They will put on other garments and approach the area for the people. When he had finished measuring the inner house, he brought me out by way of the gate facing east and measured all around. When he measured the east side with a measuring rod, it was 500 rods with a measuring rod round about. When he measured the north side, it was 500 rods by the measuring rod. When he measured the south side, it was 500 rods with the measuring rod. Then he turned about to the west side and measured 500 rods with the measuring rod. So he measured the four sides. It had a wall all around. The length was 500 and the width was 500, to make a distinction between the holy and the profane.